Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. We are back this week with Pete and talking about our next miracle with Jesus.
Yeah, continuing our series looking at those miraculous signs in the book of John. We're looking at a familiar one, Jesus walking on water this time. But there are going to be a few things that are different about this miracle than the previous miracles we've seen. And I think as we look at those differences, it's going to open our eyes to the impact that this miracle might have on us. And so before we jump into reading the passage, you've read it beforehand. What's one primary difference that we see immediately between this miracle versus all the ones that we've already studied and the ones that are to come?
Well, I mean, the one that we just heard with Gordon was, the miracle of feeding the 5,000. That's in front of a large group of people. And then so the miracle of Jesus walking on the water is just his disciples.
Right.
And so it's a much smaller.
This is the only miracle that we're going to see in the entire Gospel of John that is for a private audience.
Mm-hmm.
It's only the disciples that witness this miracle. Every other miracle, we have the wedding feast, and it's done in front of a banquet of officials, and the servants see it. We see Jesus healing the royal official's son. Right, there's a big crowd of people that are there that have come out to see it. We see the healing of the lame man right at the pool of Bethsaida. There are all these other folks that are gathered there. And then also the religious leaders now are hearing this, right? These are very public actions. And then, of course, the most public one that we see has come just on the heels of this one, which is the feeding of the 5,000, or at least the 5,000. And so thousands of people have witnessed a miracle. And immediately from that, Jesus is going to go to a miracle that only the disciples experience and see. And I think there's a lot that goes into that, right? Because there's some intention then in everything we're going to read here, where Jesus has created this miracle for his disciples. Mm-hmm. He wants his disciples to understand something about themselves, but also about who he is. And I think when we see that, and we constantly are asking the question, why is Jesus doing this to his disciples? Why is Jesus acting this way to his disciples? It's going to, I think, cultivate some really thought-provoking dialogue. So let's start by reading chapter 6, 16 and 17 only, to see how does Jesus set up this miracle that's just for his disciples.
Okay. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them.
Okay. So what's the context for the miracle?
So he purposely did not go with the disciples. Right. And so
and in the other accounts that we see in Matthew and Mark, in both of them, he specifically commands them to get into the boat. So he's put them into the boat. And what's really interesting about that is, what do we know about the disciples? Well, a majority of them are fishermen, right? We know explicitly that 4 of them are fishermen, John included in that group of 4. There's an allusion in John 21 that at least 7 of them are, because after Jesus leaves, it says 7 of them go back to the Sea of Galilee and fish. But there's a potential that more of them are. We really don't know a number of the occupations of some of the disciples. We know Matthew's a tax collector, but it's very possible that many of them. So Jesus has put them in this context that is what? It's their comfort zone.
Something they're comfortable with. Yeah.
Right? It's the thing that they do. They know this sea. They have grown up on the sea. Even those that have not been fishermen themselves grew up in fishing villages on the Sea of Galilee. They have been on this lake a million times, and they've faced a ton of different storms. So let's keep reading, and what thoughts come as you read 18 and 19, verses 18 and 19.
A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened.
So what sticks out there? What causes their fear?
The strong. Well, no, Jesus caused their fear, not the storm.
Not the storm. I think immediately we conflate miracles, right? And so we've heard the calming of the storm where they cry out to Jesus. But in this scenario, the disciples are not crying out for Jesus. There's in all 3 of the accounts, not one of them highlights their fear at the storm. Instead, they are just rowing their hearts out against this wind. And when you look at the kind of the parallel miracles, we see here that it says they've rowed 3 to 4 miles. We see in Mark that specifically they had to drop the sails and begin rowing because the winds were strong enough that it was going to be futile to try to sail it. And we also see in Mark that they have been on the lake for a minimum of 9 hours. 9 hours to row 3 to 4 miles, right? This is nearly 10 times the length it should take them. And yet they're not afraid, right?
They've probably experienced it before.
Yeah. The Sea of Galilee is known for these storms that come out of nowhere, right? North Carolina is known for these storms. I was at the beach this last week and it felt like, every day there was a storm that lasted for 10 minutes. It came out of nowhere and it disappeared into nowhere. Sea of Galilee was known for that. And so these fishermen who've spent their entire lives on the Sea of Galilee are accustomed to storms. It's not like if I was caught in a massive storm on a lake in a rowboat, I would be terrified, right? Yeah. I'm not familiar with rowing in storms, yada, yada, yada. But that's not what's happening here.
Right.
These are fishermen, and this is a specific miracle, specifically targeted towards fishermen, in which they are still in their comfort zone. And so then what does create fear for them?
Yeah, Jesus, which, he's walking on the water.
Right. So something that they can't explain.
Right.
With their comfort, their confidence. They've faced storms before. They've faced winds before. They've faced the slog of rowing against the winds before. They have not witnessed Jesus. And so Jesus then in verse 20 is going to say something really simple to them. So go ahead and read verse 20. Go read 20 and 21.
But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading.
So what sticks out there?
Well, they've been rowing for 3 or 4 miles.
9 hours.
9 hours. But then as soon as Jesus was in the boat, they immediately reached the shore. So to me, that is something that caught my attention.
Right.
The "it is I" is also something that made me think, why did he reference himself that way?
Yeah, let's start with that one because that one's really interesting. So the direct translation is "I am." Do not be afraid, right? And where do we see "I am" throughout Scripture?
Right. In the Old Testament and in reference of who God is.
Right.
Yeah.
God is the great I am.
Yeah.
And so in this moment, he says, "I am, do not be afraid." And there's this invitation to the disciples in this moment. They're only afraid. They're not afraid because of the storm. They're afraid because of this figure. And it says, "I am, do not be afraid." And it's an invitation, in essence, to quit what you're doing, which is what you're comfortable doing, what you're confident doing. You're in the storm, you're grinding. And I love how it says, and the disciples were willing to take him on, right? Anytime I think about being willing to do something, it's like doing someone a favor.
Right.
Like, hey, would you be willing to watch the kids? Or, hey, would you be willing to spot me, for lunch today? It's this invitation to sacrifice a little bit on your own. And you realize they've been fighting this wind for 9 hours, just battling it. They've barely crawled along. The wind is still swirling. And now they have to let him onto the boat. They got to stop everything. They got to let go of the oars. I was at the lake with the kids a few weeks back, and, getting somebody onto a boat is not easy. Right. And that's in calm water. And granted, they're kids, but this, you focus, everything is focused on getting that person onto the boat. And so, they're pausing what they're doing, and you think about these winds that have been blowing them. It's going to be, setting them back, all these different things, but they're willing to let him in. And then immediately after, what does it say happens? You call it out.
They reach the shore immediately.
Yeah. Now, I think the power of that statement comes when we think about what is like the thing in this miracle that John omits, that we always remember when we think about Jesus walking on the water, when we've heard it in Sunday school. Like, what's the one part of this story that just is absent in the book of John?
So I immediately think of where Peter steps out in faith. Well, faith at first, and then he starts losing his sight of Jesus, and then
So Peter's not in this. John isn't talking about Peter. That doesn't mean that
he's not there.
He didn't walk on the water.
Yeah,
it just means that John has intentionally left that part out. And here's why I think that's the case, and I think you pointed to it. There's a second miracle that happens that I think gets lost when the focus is on Peter walking on the water. And it's the fact that the boat, after 9 hours of struggle, when they stop what they're doing, which should set them back and bring Jesus on, the boat is immediately where it's supposed to be. Right? And I think this miracle that we're seeing here, yes, Jesus walking on the water is miraculous, but it only impacts Jesus, right? All the other miracles that we see are feeding the 5,000. I have food to eat, the healing, somebody is healed, the water into wine, the guests receive, like the audience always receives some sort of impact from the miracle. Walking on water, that doesn't. Right? It's just like Jesus is walking across the lake and hitchhikes onto the boat. But the impact for the disciples is when they have allowed Jesus onto the boat, they're exactly where they need to be. And I think there are so many parallels for us in our faith journey where Jesus tells us, or we feel this mountaintop moment with God where we feel this conviction and our path is set and we're like, okay, I'm going to embark on this journey. And immediately we go to the things that we know. Right. So I'm going to check off the boxes. I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to rely upon my gifts, my strengths, my understanding. And then hopefully when I get to the other side of the lake, Jesus will be there. Right. Because Jesus said he sent me out. Hopefully he'll be there. But that entire journey, that entire struggle is done on my own. Right. And it's a grind and it's difficult. And what that sets us up for in that space is either we are successful or we give up. There's no alternative. It's either I grind through it and I get there, but I'm exhausted, I'm worn out, I'm tired, or I just say, it's not worth fighting this one anymore. I'm just going to go back, right? If the disciples had turned around, I'm sure they would have gotten to the other shore very quickly. In fact, it says a verse later that ships had been swept from Tiberias to the landing, right? The boats without anyone rowing them are getting to the other shore. Yeah. And instead, these disciples surrender their will, God gets in, and they're exactly where they need to be. And I think that's an encouragement in our journey, is like we feel this prompting of the Holy Spirit, and to fight that tendency to then be like, okay, I got the plan, now I'm going to go do it. But instead be like, okay, now Jesus, what's the next step? Right. Now how do I come with you? How do I stay with you? How do I resist the temptation to rely upon the things that I'm competent in? And I think for the disciples, it's going to be a really important lesson for them, because Jesus is going to leave them another time. Right. Right? Yeah. And what do? Immediately after Jesus leaves them another time, they go back fishing. Right. They go back on the boat. Right? It takes them a minute still. But ultimately, what do? Is they keep their eyes set on Jesus, and they keep their eyes set on the resurrection. And that informs now their day-to-day, and it brings them way outside their comfort zone. And they're not going to be fishermen anymore. And they're not going to rely upon the things that they're good at. They're instead going to go do things that require God's strength to show up. So
that's interesting. Like, I've never put those, like this miracle with them going into being in the boat when Jesus arrives on shore. Yeah.
It's the same thing's happening.
Right. Yeah. Because it does make it, like, now that I see that, it's showing how easily we can go back to our same old when we lose focus of Christ. But then as soon as Jesus was back in focus, they immediately dropped everything, and after the resurrection, and
exactly,
their life was changed. I think, and I guess that's my question, is like the miracle that they saw, like it's, it was just for them.
Yeah.
How many times we do that same thing is like, it's still sometimes not, like it wasn't enough for the disciples to see this miracle that was just for them. It was after the resurrection that they actually gave up that control.
It's reminders over and over. And then when we go outside of the book of John, we see they have the first catch in the water, right? Where he calls the disciples, cast your nets to the other side. We see that happen again in John 21, where they cast their nets on the other side. And there's, so there is this perpetual reminder that the disciples need, and that we certainly need too, where I think, again, our best intention is to follow what God is doing in our life, but how easy it is to find ourselves like, wait a minute, I'm just relying on my strength only. And in those moments, there's the reminder. In those moments, it's like a slow down, let go of the oars, let Jesus in here, right? And then when Jesus is in, we're where we need to be.
Yeah.
And then there are going to be other times where, again, we embark and we forgot a pretty important part. We forgot to bring Jesus with us, right? And I think that's this reoccurring invitation that we see in the gospel messages, but also in our own lives. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, guys, we hope that you have a great discussion with your group, or have a great individual study, and we will see you next week.